The sound of a gunshot echoed through the pine forest as Zara Blackwell jerked awake, her chest heaving in panic as consciousness brutally returned. Pain radiated through her body, her head throbbed where they'd struck her, and her wrists burned from the rope that had bound them before she'd managed to work herself free. Blood seeped through her torn dress where the bullet had grazed her side. They'd left her for dead, those men who had once been her late husband's business partners. They hadn't even bothered to make sure. It was 1876, and the Colorado Territory was no place for a woman alone, especially one who knew too much. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. Zara tried to stand but collapsed almost immediately, her body betraying her as darkness threatened at the edges of her vision. She didn't know how long she lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, listening to the rustling of the leaves and the distant call of birds. The forest was growing darker, colder. Night would come soon, and with it wolves and mountain lions. She would be easy prey. A twig snapped nearby. Zara froze, her breath catching in her throat. Had they returned to finish the job? She tried to crawl toward a dense thicket, hoping to hide, but her limbs felt like lead. The sound of hoofbeats approached, and then a horse whinnied. A shadow fell across her face, and she looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the fading light. A man on horseback, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't hurt me." The figure dismounted in one fluid motion and approached cautiously. As he knelt beside her, she could finally see his face weathered from the sun and wind, with kind eyes that contradicted the hardness of his jaw. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. "Madam," he said, his voice low and gentle as he assessed her injuries. "Who did this to you?" When she couldn't answer, he reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements as if approaching a wounded animal. "You're safe now," he said, and something in his tone made her believe him. "I'm going to help you." The man, who introduced himself as Daniel Zachary, carefully lifted her onto his horse. The pain of movement nearly caused her to black out again, but his strong arms kept her steady. "My cabin's not far," he explained, mounting behind her and keeping one arm securely around her waist. "I've got supplies there. Can patch you up." As they rode through the gathering darkness, Zara felt herself leaning back against his solid chest, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the warmth of the man behind her lulling her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. "Stay with me, madam," he urged whenever her head drooped. "What's your name?" "Zara," she managed to whisper. "Zara Blackwell." "Well, Mrs. Blackwell, I need you to hold on just a little longer." "Miss," she corrected automatically. "It's Miss now." Daniel's cabin appeared through the trees, a sturdy structure built against the side of a hill. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a lantern hung from a post near the door, casting a welcoming glow. As he helped her down from the horse, Zara's legs gave way entirely. Without hesitation, Daniel swept her into his arms and carried her inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable, one large room with a fireplace at one end, a bed against the opposite wall, and a table and chairs in the center. Shelves lined with books and supplies covered one wall, surprising Zara. Daniel placed her gently on the bed and moved quickly to stoke the fire before gathering medical supplies. "I need to look at that wound," he said, returning to her side with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. "And I'm afraid this is going to hurt." Zara nodded weakly, steeling herself. He helped her sit up enough to take a swallow of whiskey, which burned down her throat and spread warmth through her chest. Daniel worked efficiently, cleaning the bullet graze on her side with a gentleness that belied his rough appearance. His hands were calloused but sure, and his touch was respectful. "You're lucky," he said as he bandaged her. "It's not deep." "Who shot you, Miss Blackwell?" Zara closed her eyes, the memories flooding back. "My husband's former business partners. They killed him 3 months ago. Made it look like an accident. I found evidence. They came for me today." Her voice broke. "They said no one would find me out here." Daniel's expression hardened. "Well, they were wrong about that." He finished securing the bandage and pulled a quilt over her. "Rest now. You're safe." As exhaustion overtook her, Zara drifted into sleep with the strange comfort of knowing that this stranger was watching over her. The next few days passed in a haze of pain and fever. Daniel tended to her faithfully, changing her bandages, helping her sip broth and water, and keeping the fire burning against the autumn chill. Sometimes she woke to find him reading by lamplight in a chair beside the bed. Other times she glimpsed him through the window, chopping wood or tending to his horse. On the fourth day, the fever broke. Zara woke feeling clearer-headed than she had since arriving. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Daniel wasn't inside, but she could hear him moving around outside. Carefully, she pushed herself to sitting, wincing at the pull of stitches in her side. For the first time, she took proper stock of her surroundings. The cabin was neat and orderly, with unexpected touches of refinement, books of poetry and philosophy on the shelves, a small carved chest set on a side table, and a sketch of a beautiful mountain landscape pinned to the wall. The door opened, and Daniel entered carrying an armful of firewood. He stopped short when he saw her sitting up. "You're awake," he said, a smile transforming his serious face. "And looking better. Thanks to you," Zara replied. I don't know how to thank you properly." Daniel set down the wood and approached the bed, studying her with careful eyes. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot and left for dead," she answered with a weak attempt at humor. "But better than yesterday." He chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to fill the cabin. "Hungry?" At her nod, he set about preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee. As they ate, Zara learned that Daniel had been living alone in this cabin for 3 years, working as a hunting guide for wealthy Easterners who came west seeking trophies. Before that, she asked, curious about this solitary man who had saved her life. Daniel's expression grew distant. "Fought in the war. Tried ranching in Texas afterward. Lost my wife and son to cholera in '71. He said it matter-of-factly, but Zara could see the old grief in his eyes. "Decided I preferred the company of mountains and trees after that." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. After a moment, she added, "My husband, Thomas, was murdered 3 months ago. Made to look like he fell from his horse. But I knew better." "How so?" Daniel asked. "Thomas never rode without checking his saddle twice. He was meticulous that way." She pushed her plate away, appetite fading. "A week after the funeral, I found documents in his study, evidence that his business partners were embezzling money. When I confronted them," she trailed off. "They decided to silence you permanently," Daniel finished. Zara nodded, tears threatening. "They took me into the woods. I thought they would just threaten me, but then one of them pulled a gun." She touched her bandaged side. "I ran. They shot at me, and I fell. They must have thought I was dead." Daniel's jaw tightened. "These men, they have names. William Garrett and Edward Pierce. They own the largest silver mine in Silver Creek." She looked down at her hands. "Powerful men." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, but didn't press further. Instead, he asked, "Do you have family? Someone I could take you to when you're stronger?" Zara shook her head. "No, no one." The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. "I can't go back to Silver Creek. They'll kill me for certain." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "You can stay here until you heal properly. After that, we'll figure something out." As the days passed, Zara's strength gradually returned. Daniel taught her to play chess during the long evenings, and though he beat her soundly the first few games, she proved a quick study. They talked deep into the night, sharing stories and opinions. She was surprised to discover he had been a lawyer before the war, educated at Harvard. He seemed equally intrigued by her background as a schoolteacher from Boston who had followed her husband west in search of adventure. During the day, when Daniel went hunting or checking his trap lines, Zara began to take over some of the domestic tasks in the cabin, mending his shirts, preparing simple meals, and organizing his surprisingly extensive book collection. The work gave her purpose and helped repay a fraction of the debt she felt she owed him. 2 weeks after her arrival, Daniel returned from hunting with a young deer slung over his shoulder. As he prepared to dress it outside, Zara watched from the doorway. "I should learn to do that," she said. Daniel glanced up, surprise evident on his face. "It's messy work." "So is life," she replied with a small smile. "If I'm going to survive out here, I should know how." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "All right then, come here." He taught her patiently how to skin and butcher the animal, wasting nothing. Though her stomach turned at first, Zara persisted, determined to learn. By the time they finished, her hands were stained with blood, but she felt a strange sense of accomplishment. "You're not like most women I've known," Daniel commented as they washed up. "I'll take that as a compliment," Zara replied, though uncertainty colored her voice. It was meant as one. His eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. He looked away first. "Storm's coming," he said, nodding toward the darkening sky. "We'd best get inside." That night, as rain lashed against the cabin and thunder rolled across the mountains, Zara couldn't sleep. The storm had brought back memories of the day she'd been attacked, and she found herself trembling beneath the quilt. Daniel, who had been sleeping on a bedroll near the fire since her arrival, noticed her distress. He approached quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. "Bad memories?" he asked softly. She nodded, embarrassed by her weakness. "I keep thinking they'll find me." "They won't," he assured her. "And if they did, they'd have to go through me first." The simple declaration, delivered without bravado, comforted her more than flowery promises would have. On impulse, she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Try to rest," he said, gently disentangling his fingers from hers. "I'll be right here." As October turned to November, the mountains received their first dusting of snow. Zara's side had healed well, leaving only a puckered scar as evidence of her ordeal. She had grown stronger physically, and Daniel had begun teaching her to shoot with his old Colt revolver. "Your aim's improving," he said one afternoon as she hit a row of cans for the third time in a row. "I had good motivation to learn," she replied, lowering the gun. "Though I hope I never have to use it on a person." Daniel nodded solemnly. "It changes you," he said, his voice distant. "Taking a life, even when necessary." Zara studied his face, seeing the shadows of war still lingering in his eyes. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but wasn't sure how he would receive it. "We should head back," Daniel said, breaking the moment. "Snow's getting heavier." As they walked back to the cabin, Zara broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "I should leave soon. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Where would you go?" "Denver, perhaps. Or further east. Somewhere they won't find me." She looked away. "I could find work teaching." "Winter's coming," Daniel pointed out. "Mountain passes will be dangerous soon. Traveling alone would be risky." "I can't stay here forever," Zara said softly, though part of her wished she could. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, snowflakes gathering on the brim of his hat. "You could," he finally said, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "Stay, I mean. If you wanted to." Her heart skipped a beat. "Daniel, just until spring," he added hastily, "when travel would be safer." Disappointment washed over her, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected. "I wouldn't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're—" He trailed off, seeming unable to find the right words. "The cabin's warmer with you in it," he finally said, then turned and continued walking. Zara followed, pondering his words and the emotion behind them. That evening, as they shared a simple supper, Daniel cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's something I should tell you," he said, "about your husband's partners." Zara set down her fork, suddenly alert. "What about them?" "While you were still recovering, I rode into Silver Creek. Wanted to see these men for myself." "You what?" Zara gasped. "Daniel, they could have recognized you, followed you back." "They didn't," he assured her. "I was careful, but I learned something interesting." He leaned forward. "They're arguing over the mine. Pierce accused Garrett of skimming profits. It's become quite the town scandal." "They're turning on each other," Zara whispered. Daniel nodded. "And that might work in our favor. If they're distracted fighting each other, they might not be looking for you as diligently. Or they might be more desperate to silence me permanently," she countered. "True," Daniel acknowledged. "But I also spoke with the sheriff carefully, didn't mention you directly. Asked hypothetical questions about evidence of embezzlement. He seemed like an honest man." Zara considered this information. "The documents I found are still in Silver Creek, hidden in a compartment beneath a floorboard in my house." "Do you trust this sheriff enough to bring him those documents?" Daniel asked. Zara thought about Sheriff Miller, a gruff but fair man who had always treated her with respect. "Maybe, but I'd have to go back to get them." Daniel corrected. "We'd have to go back." The word "we" hung between them, carrying more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. As November deepened, they planned their return to Silver Creek. The snow had temporarily abated, leaving a window of opportunity before the harsher winter weather set in. Daniel insisted they wait until Zara was fully healed and confident with a gun. Their days fell into a comfortable routine. They rose at dawn, shared breakfast, and spent the mornings on necessary chores. Afternoons were devoted to shooting practice and planning their approach to Silver Creek. Evenings were for chess, reading aloud by the fire, and increasingly personal conversations. Daniel gradually revealed more of himself: his childhood in Pennsylvania, his legal career, his brief but happy marriage, the horrors he'd witnessed during the war, and his decision to seek solitude in the mountains afterward. In turn, Zara shared stories of her strict Boston upbringing, her passion for education, her whirlwind courtship with Thomas, and their journey west 4 years ago. One evening, as they sat before the fire, Daniel confessed, "I never expected to enjoy company again. After Caroline and my son died, I thought I was better off alone. And now?" Zara asked, her heart beating faster. Daniel stared into the flames. "Now I'm not so sure." The next morning, Zara found Daniel outside, splitting wood with methodical precision. She watched him for a moment, admiring the strength in his movements and the determined set of his jaw. "We should leave tomorrow," she said when he paused to wipe his brow. "For Silver Creek." Daniel set down his axe and turned to face her. "Are you certain you're ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "The longer we wait, the greater the chance the documents will be discovered or destroyed." He nodded, studying her face. "It'll be dangerous." "Most worthwhile things are," she countered with a small smile. That evening, as they made final preparations, the atmosphere in the cabin was charged with tension, not just from the danger they would soon face, but from the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them. As Zara checked the revolver Daniel had given her, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked. "Just thinking about how different you are from the woman I found in the woods," he said. "You were brave even then, but now." He shook his head in admiration. "I had a good teacher," she replied softly. "No," Daniel disagreed. "It was already in you. You just needed the chance to discover it." Zara set down the gun and moved closer to him. "Daniel, if something happens tomorrow, don't," he interrupted. "We'll both come back." "But if we don't," she persisted, "I need you to know how grateful I am. Not just for saving my life, but for showing me who I could be." Daniel's expression softened. He reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Zara," a sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin windows, breaking the moment. Daniel stepped back, his hand falling to his side. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice gruff. "Long ride tomorrow." They left at first light, Daniel on his gelding and Zara on a steady mare he'd traded for with a neighboring trapper. The journey to Silver Creek would take most of the day, and they rode in companionable silence, each lost in thought about what lay ahead. By mid-afternoon, the landscape began to look familiar to Zara. They stopped on a ridge overlooking Silver Creek, a bustling town nestled in a valley, dominated by the silver mine that had brought prosperity and corruption in equal measure. "My house is on the north side of town," Zara explained, pointing. "Near the church." Daniel nodded. "We'll wait until nightfall. Less chance of being recognized." They made camp in a sheltered grove, far enough from town to avoid detection, but close enough to reach their destination quickly after dark. As the sun began to set, Daniel outlined their plan once more. "We'll enter town from the north, go directly to your house, retrieve the documents, and then find Sheriff Miller. If all goes well, we'll be heading back to the cabin before dawn." "And if something goes wrong?" Zara asked. Daniel's expression hardened. "Then we improvise. But no matter what happens, we stay together." "Understood," Zara nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. As darkness fell, they mounted their horses and began the careful descent into town. Silver Creek was quiet as they rode in, most establishments closed except for the saloon, from which piano music and raucous laughter spilled into the street. They tied their horses in a stand of trees behind Zara's former home, a modest but well-built house that stood dark and empty. "Thomas always kept a spare key under the back step," Zara whispered as they approached. Sure enough, the key was still there, and moments later they were inside. The house felt cold and abandoned. Dust covered the furniture, and the air smelled stale. Zara led Daniel to the study, where she knelt and pried up a loose floorboard beneath the desk. From the hidden compartment, she withdrew a leather portfolio. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she handed it to Daniel. "The evidence that got Thomas killed." Daniel opened the portfolio and scanned the documents inside, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is more than embezzlement," he said quietly. "They were deliberately sabotaging safety measures in the mine to save money. Men died because of this." Zara nodded, tears threatening. "Thomas discovered it just before he was killed. He was planning to take it to the territorial governor." A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside the study. Daniel immediately extinguished their lantern and drew his gun, pushing Zara behind him. Well, came a voice from the doorway. "Look who's returned from the dead." William Garrett stood there, his own gun pointed at them. The moonlight through the window illuminated his smug face. "How did you know we were here?" Zara demanded. "Old Jenkins at the livery has standing instructions to notify me if anyone unusual comes to town," Garrett replied. Imagine my surprise when he described a woman who looked remarkably like the late Mrs. Blackwell. He gestured with his gun. "The documents, please. So you can destroy them?" Zara challenged. "Like you destroyed Thomas when he threatened to expose you?" Garrett's expression hardened. "Your husband was a fool. He could have been rich beyond imagination if he joined us instead of fighting us." He took a step forward. "Now, the documents." Daniel's grip on his gun never wavered. "You're outnumbered, Garrett." "Am I?" Garrett smirked as another figure appeared behind him, Edward Pierce, also armed. "Throw down your weapons," Pierce ordered, "or I start shooting." Daniel didn't move. "If you wanted us dead, you'd have shot already. You want to know who else has seen these documents?" "Smart man," Garrett acknowledged. "So tell us." "The sheriff has copies," Zara lied boldly. "We sent them to him before coming here." Uncertainty flashed across Garrett's face. Pierce cursed under his breath. "She's bluffing," Pierce growled. "Miller would have arrested us already if he had evidence." "Maybe he's building a stronger case," Daniel suggested calmly. "Gathering more witnesses." While they talked, Zara had been slowly reaching for a heavy paperweight on the desk behind her. In one swift movement, she hurled it through the window, shattering the glass with a crash that echoed through the quiet town. The distraction gave Daniel the split second he needed. He fired at Pierce, the bullet striking the man's shoulder and sending him stumbling backward. Garrett returned fire, the bullet splintering the wood of the desk as Daniel pulled Zara to the floor. Shouts could be heard from the street as townspeople responded to the gunfire. Daniel fired again, forcing Garrett to take cover in the hallway. "Go," Daniel urged Zara, pushing the portfolio into her hands. "Out the window. Get to the sheriff." "Not without you," she insisted. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. "Go." Heart pounding, Zara climbed through the broken window, careful of the jagged glass. She dropped to the ground and ran toward the sheriff's office, clutching the precious documents to her chest. Behind her, more gunshots rang out, and she prayed that Daniel would keep his promise to follow. The sheriff's office was lit when she burst through the door, finding Sheriff Miller at his desk, already alert from the gunfire. "Mrs. Blackwell," he exclaimed, rising to his feet. "But you're not dead," she finished breathlessly. "Sheriff, William Garrett and Edward Pierce killed my husband and tried to kill me." She thrust the portfolio at him. "This is why." Evidence of their crimes at the mine. Miller took the documents, his expression growing dark as he skimmed them. "Where are Garrett and Pierce now?" "At my house. They ambushed us. My friend Daniel Zachary is holding them off." More gunshots sounded from the direction of her home. Miller grabbed his shotgun and called to his deputy, who had appeared from the back room. "Jenkins, stay with Mrs. Blackwell." "I'm going to." The office door burst open again, and Daniel stumbled in, blood seeping from a wound on his arm. "They're coming," he warned. "Pierce is down, but Garrett's rallied some of his men from the saloon." Miller cursed and barred the door. "Jenkins, get Mrs. Blackwell and her friend out the back way. Take them to Doc Harris. I'll hold off Garrett and send word to the territorial marshal." "No," Zara protested. "I'm not running anymore." Daniel gripped her shoulders. "Zara, please. You've done what you came to do. The evidence is with the law now." "And what about you?" she demanded. tears streaming down her face as she looked at his bloodied arm. "I won't leave you." The sound of angry voices grew closer outside. Miller made a quick decision. "Jenkins, get some of the townsmen. Anyone not on Garrett's payroll. This ends tonight." What followed was a night of tension and standoff, as the town of Silver Creek divided itself between those loyal to Garrett and those who stood with the sheriff. Barricaded in the sheriff's office, Zara bandaged Daniel's arm while Miller organized the defense. By dawn, reinforcements had arrived from the next town over, and Garrett, realizing he was outnumbered, surrendered. As he was led away in handcuffs, he spat at Zara's feet. "You should have stayed dead in those woods, woman." Daniel stepped between them, his voice low and dangerous. "But she didn't. And now you'll hang for what you did to her and her husband." In the aftermath, as statements were taken and telegrams sent to the territorial governor, Daniel and Zara found a quiet moment alone on the porch of the doctor's house, where Daniel's wound had been properly treated. "It's over," Zara said, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. "I can hardly believe it." Daniel nodded, his good arm around her shoulders. "Justice for Thomas." "Yes." She turned to face him. "But what now? For us, I mean." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "That depends," he finally said. "On what?" "On whether you still want to go to Denver." His eyes searched hers. "Or if you might consider a more permanent arrangement at a certain cabin in the mountains." Zara's heart soared. "Are you asking me to stay with you, Daniel Zachary?" "I'm asking for more than that," he said softly, taking her hand. "When I found you in those woods, something changed in me. You brought life back to places in my heart I thought were dead forever." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Zara. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making you feel as safe as you've made me feel whole." Tears filled Zara's eyes as she reached up to touch his face. "I think I've been falling in love with you since you first said, 'You're safe now.'" Their first kiss was gentle, mindful of their injuries, but full of promise. When they parted, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "So, the cabin?" "The cabin," she agreed. "Our cabin." They married 2 days later in Silver Creek's small church, with Sheriff Miller as witness. By the time the first heavy snow fell, they were back in their mountain home, beginning a new life together. Spring came to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and new beginnings. Daniel expanded the cabin, adding a second room and a proper porch where they could watch the sunset together. Zara started a small school for the children of nearby trappers and homesteaders. Garrett and Pierce faced justice for their crimes. The trial was the biggest event the territory had seen in years, and when the guilty verdict came down, many families of miners who had died in preventable accidents finally found closure. On the anniversary of the day Daniel found Zara in the woods, he took her to that very spot, now transformed by spring growth and sunshine. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Zara said, looking around at the peaceful forest. "Best year of my life," Daniel replied, pulling her close. "Though I expect the next one to be even better." "Why is that?" she asked, smiling up at him. He placed a hand gently on her stomach, where their child was just beginning to show. "Because our family is growing. Because every day with you makes me happier than I ever thought possible." As they stood there, the past and future meeting in one perfect moment, Zara knew that from the darkest day of her life had come her greatest blessing. She had been left in the woods to die, but instead, she had found love, justice, and a life more fulfilling than she could have imagined. "Take me home, Daniel," she whispered against his lips. Hand in hand, they walked back toward their cabin, the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the western sky.